Today down in the comments, I know we all love movies. I know we all love collectibles and getting stuff. But specifically, I want to hear about the people who are poster collectors and the kinds of posters you collect and how you display the posters you have. The releases we're going to talk about today and a couple other lines have started doing this. They're including posters. They're including reproduction posters with the Blu-rays, with the DVDs. And I wonder how we're displaying these, if they're just one more thing to collect. Hello, I'm Adam Caesar. This is Project Black T-Shirt, the channel where we take a new or a reissue horror movie or horror movies and then pair that with a piece of reading, piece of horror fiction in most cases, that you'll like to read if you like those movies. I'm the author of Clown in a Cornfield and several other novels and novellas and short stories that you can go read right now in ebook, paperback, hardcover like Clown in the Cornfield here, or audiobook. A lot of them are available on beautiful, professionally narrated audiobooks. Someone with a nicer voice than me reading it to you. So please go check those out. And if you like the books, if you've enjoyed them, if you enjoy supporting this channel by checking out my books, that's kind of the way to do it, other than liking and subscribing, which thank you. But tell people about these books. It really, really helps me out. Today, it's been a little while since we checked in on the MVD Rewind collection, a series of not only horror, but genre movies just in general, kind of video store standbys they seem to release. They do a lot of action movies too. They do all kinds of things. They do like video game movies like Double Dragon from the 90s. And the thing about these editions is they're fairly affordable, and the amount of extras, the amount of care that goes into preparing extra materials on top of these movies is really almost unprecedented. It's incredible the amount of features these discs seem to pack in, and they're getting more and more packed as they go. Because, like I said, these are spine numbered. I've got 7 of them in my collection, and we're going to talk about 2 of them today, the two most recent ones that I've gotten. And these are probably my 2 favorite releases, if not my 2 favorite films, but probably my 2 favorite releases that they've done. We're going to talk about them right now. So both of these films are from 1992, kind of a real formative time for a movie to come out for me, because these are movies that I remember being in mom and pop video stores. I remember being in Blockbuster specifically. And Split Second, starring Rutger Hauer, is a movie that I remember so vividly renting from Blockbuster. I remember that my family's not super, super tight-knit and we're spread all over the country, but I remember my aunt and uncle were over, and my parents let me choose Split Second as the movie that we would watch when my aunt and uncle were staying over for like a weekend or something when I was a kid, like really close to when this movie came out. So it was probably like 5 or 6. And I just remember gently being walked out of the room when it seemed like I couldn't take it anymore, and then walked back in, because it's like kind of a relentless movie to show a child. But we're going to talk about a 30-something-year-old's take on this movie right now, and you'll probably recognize it more. The newly commissioned cover art that MVD did is really beautiful, but the kind of Terminator meets Predator meets Alien knockoff of the original cover, to me is so iconic. It's a movie, again, I hadn't seen since I saw it when I was a child, so basically approaching this as if I hadn't seen this movie. But there it is, Split Second, Rutger Hauer. Oh, it's awesome. It's such a cool cover. So this is kind of what it looks like on the box. This is in the near future. I think it's like 2008 when the purported future in Split Second happens. It takes place in London. It is a British film, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. It takes place in London. Polar ice caps are melted or something. Something about global warming has caused like rains and excess, and the River Thames to overflow, and London's really like flooded out. So this is kind of like a soft water world. This is like a very wet Mad Max, very wet Blade Runner future. And Rutger Hauer plays an ex-cop who is super badass in all kinds of gear. He has a tragic backstory where his partner was killed, and he was killed by this thing that he's hunting. And I say thing not to be coy, not to be like, oh, it's a monster like like it says on the box. But the movie is incredibly evasive as to what exactly this, is this a serial killer? Is this a genetically modified serial killer? Is this a satanic serial killer who Rutger Hauer's character is psychically linked to, which is one of the more interesting elements. But it's just a mishmash of different things. And you watch all the special features on here, of which there are a literal ton. Like, there is tiny King James Bible font for the special features list here. There's so much on this disc, and they talk to so many people. They don't talk to either of the directors, and they don't talk to Rutger Hauer, because that's impossible, sadly. But they do a lot of these interviews during COVID. Some of these are like self-filmed and stuff like that, but they're incredibly in-depth and great. But this is a fantastic release. And if you haven't seen this movie, it's got such an interesting tone, because there's parts that are funny, there's parts that are dead serious. It reminds me of even though it's 1992, it feels like a few years earlier. It feels very mid to late 80s. Feels very mid to late 80s Roger Corman. But that the fact that the directors who were brought on, the all the creative people's really outside of Rutger Hauer, everyone is British involved in this film, and it's filmed in Britain, and it has just an incredibly British feel to it. When I think of Corman, and I think of that Corman style sci-fi exploitation mashup stuff, that feels really American to me. That feels really crass and American, and maybe it's just me being a kind of gullible American, but adding that sheen of Britishness to it really kind of classes it up, really makes it an interesting film, made seemingly on a shoestring. If you hear them talk about the budget, there's a lot of production value. It looks really good. It's a really cool looking movie. The way that they go about the waterlogged London. There's this huge sequence in a train station, and then and all these different like Blade Runner-esque nightclubs, the kind of futuristic S&M clubs. All the while, this unseen creature is ripping people's hearts out, so you get really cool gore effects. Steve Norrington, who went on to direct Blade and stuff like that, and is a special effects guy, designed the creature. A lot of great effects work in here. The first director of this was Tony Maylam, who directed The Burning. He's a British director, done a bunch of films, and he actually conflicting, if you listen to the features, conflicting as to what exactly happened. But it sounds like he couldn't shoot action, or the producers didn't like the way he was shooting action. So he was replaced by Ian Sharp, who is who finished up the movie and did like the big action ending. And he's a pretty prominent second unit director. Even though you hear that and you hear troubled production, and there's people on the special features kind of talking about, they say Rutger Hauer is very nice. They're very quick to say like Rutger Hauer was so nice, but they also say that he had a little bit of outsized influence on like what his character should be and what his character should be doing, which necessitated them like rewriting stuff while they were making the movie. And all of that kind of combines to what some of the people behind the production are thinking it's detriment, is to kind of how choppy it feels and how asynchronous some of this stuff is. But when you watch the movie, I thought that was a feature, not a bug. I like how mishmash it is. I like how weird it is, and how there's like he like yells at a dog, and you only find out later that he might have been psychically linked to that dog because he knows that the dog saw one of the murderers. It's a wild movie. Nothing but fun. Kim Cattrall's in this. Peter Postlewaite. It's a buddy cop movie with Alastair Duncan playing the kind of button-up foil to Rutger Hauer's insane maverick. It's just a really fun movie. And if you haven't seen it, and if you like these types of movie, you like the sci-fi horror aesthetic, quasi-cyberpunk, quasi-post-apocalyptic, great little movie. And you just can't, you can see they have the listings back here. I watched all of the interviews which was hours and hours and hours of content. Producer Laura Gregory and actor Alastair Duncan. I thought that was one of the best ones. This really does feel like if it's not necessarily a director-driven movie, especially because the director seemingly was such a kind of hired hand, this seems like it's a Laura Gregory joint, and you hear other interviews that kind of back that up. The composer, the DP, the line producer, which is interesting. You never hear, like, you don't see a lot of interviews with line producers, and like he seems aware of that, because right up front he's like, this is what a line producer does, and he like explains what a line producer is, which is just, that's kind of emblematic of this collection in general, that they would go through such detail. They would track this person down and talk to them for 27 minutes. It's great, and there's not that much repetitious. There's not that much that repeats. You hear the story of the handover of the directors kind of from different perspectives, but there's not that much that repeats. It's a fantastic disc. So even if you have the tiniest inkling of liking Split Second, you will be able to know everything about how this movie was made. It's really, really, really interesting. The interview with the special effects guy was great, because he worked on Rawhead Rex and had worked with Clive Barker and stuff. He has a really cool studio that they filmed him in. Yeah, it's well worth picking up. As with all the stuff that I talk about, I'll put the links down in the description to where you can buy this, either Amazon or our friends at Diabolic DVD, I think, have this. Now, if that sounded like a love fest for Split Second, it was a love fest for Split Second, but I saved the best for last. Also from 1992, Mikey. This is Mikey. Now, this is a film that I do not have the nostalgic hook that I had with Split Second. I had never seen this movie. I'd never even really heard of this movie until I'd seen the cover for this, and I'm interested in the MVD Rewind collection, and I kind of like every time they announce a title, I take a look and say, you know, oh, is this one I've seen before? Is this one I want? What are the features? Something about the cover to Mikey, and just something about the premise of like, oh, it's a killer kid movie from the early 90s. It's basically Problem Child, the one with John Ritter. But if the Problem Child was just straight up annihilating families the whole time. That's really the premise. To talk about the plot is Mikey is a kid that's being adopted and kind of bouncing from home to home. We have inkling that he has a history of abuse. He's this 9-year-old kid, but he's also very smart and very charming and very manipulative. But they do not hide the ball at all in this movie. They do not be like, make you think like maybe there's something wrong with Mikey. Maybe Mikey's evil. No, they knew that the tagline for this movie, remember, Jason and Freddy were kids once too, Freddy misspelled, but they know that that's the tagline. They know that you're sitting down to watch a killer kid movie. And the opening to this movie is like a 10-minute sequence where we see him annihilate his first family, and it is just brutal and insane, and he has like one-liners kind of like Chucky. It's I really don't want to risk overselling this movie, but I really don't want to undersell it, and I don't want to hide the fact that I just had a great time watching this movie. Super dark moments that approach camp but are never. It's not a movie that is self-parody. It's not a movie that's winking too hard at its audience. If anything, the performers are in on it, but everyone's a professional and everyone's showing up. It's a movie that, just from the time period and the premise, I was like getting this. I was like a little bit like, oh no, I may not like Mikey, and I may have like a dud in my collection because this may be like one of those 90s movies that's more of a thriller. It's more of like a halfway between made-for-TV, made-for-video, and theatrical. That's what I was really worried this movie was going to be. And like that opening assures you that this movie is not that. And then every 10 minutes there's some ridiculous conceit and some insane line that Mikey gets. The star, Brian Bonsall, he worked a lot in the early 90s. You'll recognize him as a child actor. A lot of the kids in here, there's like his classmates and his neighbor and stuff like that, you'll recognize from kind of 90s kids movies, 90s family movies. I think he was in Star Trek. He's now a punk singer. You see him in the documentary, but we'll talk about that in a second. John Deal, Ashley Lawrence from Hellraiser. This is so many great moments and so many really riotous, mean-spirited kills. This is like weird digressions where he's doing really weird serial killer type stuff. There's so many of these movies. There's so many Killer Kid movies, and so many of them feel like they're holding back because it is kids, and they hold back a little bit. Like, oh, The Omen clearly doesn't hold back, but something like even Orphan, which is a movie that has a lot of. I really like Orphan. It's great, but I think she kills like one person in that movie. This is Mikey. Mikey does that before this 2-minute mark. It's really, really mean. It's really, really. It's got a great feel to it because they shot in Arizona, and you hear them talk about in the documentary that's on this. The documentary is just as long as the movie, by the way. It is an hour-and-a-half documentary about the making of Mikey, and it's really in depth. But you hear them talk about how they filmed in Arizona because the 9-year-old that plays Mikey, they had to shoot during the summer so that they had to have him in school, less time on set, and that Arizona had like more lax child labor laws compared to California. So they shot there so he's in every scene, so they can just have him on set as much as possible within limits. You hear that, and you hear that like, oh, we did Arizona for like budgetary reasons and for scheduling reasons, but it's got a great feeling to it because if this movie were set in LA, it would be kind of like any number of other movies, and it would look very similar. But it's got this interesting Arizona feel to it. It's not a regional horror movie because it's not made by Arizonians, but it has a regional feel to it. Awesome movie. Came as a total surprise. I had watched it at night, and then the next morning I was watching the making of documentary, and my wife kind of passed and was seeing the little clips they were playing in the making of documentary, and she expressed interest in it, and I was like, let's watch it. Let's watch Mikey. So I watched Mikey twice in a 24-hour period, and I can't say that of many other films. But yeah, I was just like, oh, you got to get a load of this. Watch this. And she's not a horror person at all, and she even enjoyed it. There's such interesting 1992, especially if you're around my age, if you're in your early 30s, you'll really get a kick out of Mikey. Just awesome. And that documentary, that hour-and-a-half documentary, they talked to one of the producers, the director, Mikey himself, and the DP. The director is Dennis Dimster Denk, and it's such an interesting story because he got his start in Hollywood as a child actor. He was on stuff like Charlie's Angels and all this, and they talk about how he understood that side of the camera very well, and then he went to film school. The producer they talked to, Nathan Zahavi, his job was kind of to go around to all these area film schools and watch the thesis project, watch the thesis films for all these film students. So when Dennis Dimster Denk made this movie, he was, I think he said he's 24 when they were shooting. He was like 25 when it came out. That's insane to me. He directed this feature film when he was that young, that fresh out of film school. They kind of it was a lower budgeted production. This is how they were making a lot of these movies at the time, to hear Zahavi tell it. But it's wonderful, like real lightning in a bottle movie. Really also one of those movies where you're watching it, and I was watching it, and I was like, how have I never heard of this before? How have I never seen this before? How is that line, teach me how to die, like how's that not like a midnight movie staple line? I'm excited for movie theaters to come back, and I'm excited for repertory screenings to start again, because this is something like if the Exhumed Films showed this at like a horror-thon, which is like their overnight event, this would kill. People would be really into this, I think. So that is Rutger Hauer, Split Second. That is Mikey. Both well worth picking up. I'll put the links down in the description. And this week's book recommendation, and it kind of goes along with Mikey, but not really. This is just a book that I really read recently and I really like, and I want to talk about. But this is Good Neighbors by Sarah Langan. And if you've seen this book around and if you've heard about this book, you're probably like, oh, that doesn't really sound like a horror novel. That doesn't really sound like the kind of thing that Adam usually talks about. And you're kind of right, and you're kind of not. But I'm talking about it because Sarah Langan is one of my favorite novelists. She did The Missing and Audrey's Door. She did those 3 novels and doing short stories and stuff like that. But it's been a while since her last novel. And those 3 novels were pure horror novels. They were pure horror paperback originals. Awesome writer, incredible writer. And it's been a little while since her last book. And when I first heard Good Neighbors was coming out, and I heard that it was set on Long Island, it is a paranoid thriller, neighborhood thriller. Monsters arrive on Maple Street. Quite literally, there's a Maple Street in the book. Set in Nassau County, where it name drops a lot of Long Island stuff. I'm from Long Island. I was just so excited to pick up this book. I was so excited to finally read this book. And it met and exceeded all expectations. It's fantastic. Very briefly, the plot is about, because I don't want to give too much away, it kind of centers on the friendship, or is it a friendship, between 2 women in suburbia and their families, and how they're kind of driven apart. The novel's very interesting, kind of going along with Split Second too, because this is totally not, but plot-wise, this is a near future novel, and the kind of decay of the planet plays like a big plot and thematic through line in this book. There's a sinkhole that opens up real early in the neighborhood that everyone's living in, and events around the sinkhole, people getting swallowed up, like kind of tragic accidents, spiral out of control and become this kind of witch trial of accusations of like, I never liked you and you're hiding this secret and you and this, like back and forth between these 2 families. And it gets really, really intense. It gets really, really tragic and sad. But it's always kind of believable, but also that idea that this is like a near future novel. There's kind of newspaper clippings and book excerpts looking back on these events like 10 or 15 years on, and trying to make sense of them, and they're kind of placed in really enigmatic ways to make you think that one thing's going to happen when another thing's going to happen. It's a really interesting, extremely structured novel, hell of a fast read, and like I said, just really not traditional horror like Langan's other 3 novels, but still very much would appeal to genre fans, because it is scary. It's a scary book because it's scary because you're like, oh, that like this seems incredibly plausible, even though it seems set in this somewhat sci-fi future, even though it's not really sci-fi. It's just like, how would things progress in 10 years? It's really, really good. I really, really like it. I really, really recommend it. That's Good Neighbors by Sarah Langan. All right, that's it for us today. The book is Clown in the Cornfield. Please go pick it up. Stoker nominated book. Look at that. I got a certificate and everything in May. I think it's May 22nd is when we'll learn if it's a winner. But it's nominated right now, and it's nominated with a lot of other great books, and I'm so proud of it. So thank you so much for everyone who's read it, everyone who's left a review on Amazon and Goodreads and stuff like that. It really, really helps me out. If you buy a copy for your friends because you already have one, that also helps too. Thank you so much. Like, subscribe, all that other stuff. Go see me on Twitter. I'll see you later.